More than 100 protesters are arrested trying to storm Aintree racecourse ahead of the Grand National. Police are forced to carry some of them away to clear the course, and the delayed race eventually goes ahead.
The numbers probably do surprise me, in truth, but clearly a coordinated attempt to stop the race running.
Also, it's the end of the road for smart motorways after concerns over safety and cost. Britons in Sudan are warned to stay indoors amid fierce fighting between the army and paramilitaries. And Manchester City closed the gap on the Premier League leaders with a dominating win over Leicester.
This is ITV News with Gamal Fahnbulleh.
Good evening. More than 100 people were arrested today as they tried to storm Aintree racecourse just before the running of the Grand National. Police had to drag and carry animal rights protesters off the course as they tried to glue and handcuff themselves in place. It caused the race to be delayed by only 15 minutes, but the disruption would have been seen by hundreds of millions of viewers around the world. And the deaths of a horse during the race and another earlier in the day have provided a catalyst for animal rights groups to call for the national and the sport to be banned. From Aintree, Chris Cotter reports.
A bright and beautiful day for the 175th running of the Grand National, but a cloud hung heavy over Aintree.
No excuse for animal abuse.
Action from animal rights activists threatened to disrupt the race.
Around 40 horses have perished on this course, and undoubtedly there will be more.
Is it a physical protest a reality today? I mean, disrupting the race.
I think, there are many things happening today, but what we're doing here is we are peacefully protesting.
Police made 3 arrests in the morning. Spotters looked out for trouble from the Aintree stands, and security lined the course prepared for any disturbance. But then this.
Protesters have got on to the racecourse.
6 protesters managed to breach the perimeter fence using ladders and made their way onto the track. All were arrested. But it was just the tip of the iceberg. In total, 118 arrests were made around the perimeter, including 7 preemptively on the nearby M57 motorway.
The fact is, significant numbers of people were clearly determined to get onto that course and stop the race taking place. The numbers probably do surprise me, in truth, but clearly a coordinated attempt to stop the race running.
But the intrusion meant a 14-minute delay to the world's most famous jumps race. A fatal fall followed at the first, casting a shadow over a famous victory for the favourite Corach Rambler jockey Derek Fox and Scottish-based trainer Lucinda Russell. But while Corach Rambler was celebrating, this is the place where the horse Hill 16 was sadly lost at the very first fence, further fuelling now a raging debate about the future of the Grand National.
The race was delayed by some time, so you've got to think if that's affected the horses anyway, and you've got to think of would that have happened if the race wasn't delayed.
It brings sadness to the sport. It makes you feel a little bit guilty for being here.
I know what people are trying to say about
definitely.
Animal cruelty.
The thoroughbreds are the born to run, but I understand both sides.
One of the most dramatic and contentious days in the history of the Grand National. The question now is what next?
Well, Chris is still at Aintree for us tonight. Chris, a total of 3 horses died at Aintree this week. Presumably the protesters feel this proves their point somewhat.
Yeah, ammunition for those against the race. 3 died at the meet this year, 4 last year, prompting one of the pressure group spokesmen from Animal Aid today to say the Jockey Club and British racing should hang their heads in shame over what we've seen over the past 3 days. The Jockey Club will point to the fact that at the end of the 1980s they made this course a lot safer, making some of the fences smaller, dropping some of the ditches away, and then again in 2013 they made changes as well. But after what happened today, hard to see how they can appease the pressure groups from stopping this kind of thing from happening again next year.
OK, Chris at Aintree, thank you. Campaigners against so-called smart motorways, which they say are anything but, have won at least part of their argument. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is cancelling any new ones amid concerns about their safety and cost. Existing stretches will remain, but subject to new safety measures. Our political correspondent Harry Horton has the details.
They are the motorways campaigners say are anything but smart. Tonight, the Prime Minister appears to agree and says plans to build new smart motorways will be scrapped. 14 new smart motorway schemes have been cancelled. 2 stretches of smart motorway under construction and almost complete will be finished. The changes are expected to save the taxpayer more than £1 billion. Smart motorways have long been criticised by some MPs and road safety campaigners. Claire Mercer's husband Jason was killed on a section of the M1 without a hard shoulder. She welcomes tonight's change but says the Prime Minister needs to go further.
It's good news, but it is still only half the battle. We are not stopping until we've got the hard shoulder back on existing motorways, because obviously it's the existing ones that are killing us.
Around 10% of England's motorway network is made up of smart motorways. On some, the hard shoulder has been converted into a live running lane to reduce congestion. But after dozens of fatal accidents, safety concerns have continued to grow.
All our surveys show about 80% of drivers are not confident on smart motorways. And we've seen far too many deaths over the last decade or so. It's something we've constantly been campaigning on.
Tonight, the Prime Minister said drivers deserve to have confidence in the roads they use. But some argue that will only happen when existing smart motorways are scrapped, as well as new ones. Harry Horton, ITV News.
Tensions between Sudan's 2 main military forces erupted into open warfare today. The country's army has been battling the largest paramilitary force there since early this morning. British citizens have been advised by the embassy to stay indoors. Callum Watkinson has the latest.
With fighter planes in the air and soldiers on the streets, the paramilitary Rapid Support Force and the Sudanese army clashed in Khartoum today. Passengers cowered in the airport as it came under attack in what many fear are the opening salvos of a civil war. The Foreign Office advised Britons in Khartoum to stay inside, though one resident told us he wouldn't have dared venture out today.
We have been hearing non-stop gunfire and different sorts of it, more like bombing sounds and so on. And for a couple of hours, we were hearing jet fighters flying over our houses and also carrying out airstrikes.
The Rapid Support Force and the army signed an agreement in December to return the country to civilian government after working together in 2019 to depose the former president. But they were never friends. And for many Sudan watchers, today's eruption of violence was inevitable.
It's been an open question for a while for outside observers as to who would actually come out on top in a contest between these two. And the general sense is that it's a terrible question to ask because such a war would be unwinnable because both sides are so strong.
The US still spoke today about opportunity to pursue the faltering governance framework. But the planned merging of the RSF with the army is something the paramilitaries don't want, and they have the means to fight their corner. Callum Watkinson, ITV News.
Health bosses are warning that the next nurses' strike in 2 weeks' time will significantly increase the risk to patients. Emergency and cancer nurses are set to join the walkout for the first time over the May Day bank holiday. And there are worries tonight that further strikes could be called in coordination with junior doctors after neither union ruled it out. Chloe Keeley reports.
Hospitals were attempting to get back to their normal routines today, following 4 days of walkouts by junior doctors. But as one strike ends, another is already looming. Hours after nurses voted in favour of a new 48-hour strike next month, their colleagues at the Doctors' Union refused to rule out the possibility of joint action.
The prospect of junior doctors and nurses out at the same time, we would be in genuinely uncharted territory. The NHS has never had to face that prospect. It would be incredibly difficult to manage the challenges and risks there.
Nurses and junior doctors want a pay rise. And yesterday, members of the Royal College of Nursing voted narrowly to reject the government's offer of 5%, although their colleagues at another big union voted to accept it. Nurses have already staged several walkouts this winter, but what will be different about this one is that nurses working in emergency departments, intensive care units and cancer care will be joining their colleagues on strike for the first time. Abby works in A&E and says nurses deserve more than the government's offering.
Staff are still struggling, it's affecting morale, it's affecting mental health. We're still trying our best, even at this moment. Short-staffed, underpaid, underrun, lack of equipment.
But one NHS boss warned today that both sides will have to compromise.
So my sympathies ultimately lie with the patients because they're the ones who are suffering. They've got to come to the table and they've got to do it quickly. This is the NHS we're talking about. This is people's lives we're talking about.
But if patients were hoping for an end to these strikes, their waiting time isn't over yet. Chloe Keedy, ITV News.
In other news today, the Postal Workers Union has reached an agreement with Royal Mail which could stop them taking further strike action. After nearly a year of talks, union members will now have to vote on the details, which have not yet been announced. Royal Mail staff staged a series of walkouts last year, including in the run-up to Christmas, over pay and working conditions. Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf has confirmed the SNP will have external input into a review of its governance as police investigates the party's finances. Mr Yousaf also said the party is solvent and not considering bankruptcy. And Paul O'Grady's death certificate says he died of a cardiac arrest caused by heart disease. The TV presenter and comedian died late last month at the age of 67. He'd previously suffered 3 heart attacks before his 65th birthday. On to sport, and Premier League champions Manchester City have cut the gap to current leaders Arsenal to just 3 points. Erling Haaland scored twice as City maintained their winning streak with a dominant victory over relegation-threatened Leicester City. Final score 3-1. Manchester United's women beat Brighton 3-2 to reach the FA Cup final. Rachel Williams with the winner, taking United to their first major final. And Wales were humiliated by England in the women's Six Nations, beaten 59-3 in Cardiff. England cruised to victory, dominating the second half, crushing Welsh hopes of a triple crown and extended their unbeaten Six Nations tally to 22 matches. And that is it for tonight. The weather forecast is next, but from all of us here on the Weekend News team, many thanks indeed for watching. Bye-bye.